Okay, so now we entered the second text, the Ladder to Heaven, page 13. That's the text I'm going to be focusing on. So we've talked about the knowledge of the heart. We've talked about how certain feelings are actually a moment of truth, right? There's a way that reality can respond to the longings of the heart, just like reality can respond or correspond to the questions of the mind, right? So this response of reality to the longings of the heart, the emotional experience we have can be seen as a moment of truth for Rumi, right? Now, again, not every feeling is going to be truthful, just like not every thought is going to be truthful, right? So how do we make sure that we are really experiencing that our emotional life is really how should I say, carrier of truth and not of falsehood, right? Just like Maimonides said, we had to purify the mind to make sure that we would have truthful thoughts and not just narrow prejudiced thoughts. There is also for Rumi a purification of the heart that's needed, so that when we look in the heart, the feelings there are not confused or like this, right? All murky and not really giving us any sense of what is real, right? So right now we're going to talk about the purification of the heart so that we can maximize the experience of truth on an emotional level, right? And not be interrupted by murky feelings, confused feelings, toxic feelings, right? So according to Rumi, if the heart is not pure, right? If you're full of clutter, if you have a lot of toxic feelings, if you have a lot of hatred and resentment and negative emotions, right? It's going to be very hard to have this kind of experience of the divine emotionally, right? Because you're cluttered. In the same way that for Maimonides, the mind cannot receive the divine light when it's too narrow or when it's too cluttered by prejudices, is the same. The heart cannot receive, right, these moments of truth, these experiences or these feelings, right? The mind receives thoughts, right, from the divine, clear thoughts, clear inspiration, what to do next. The heart, however, receives certain feelings, clear feelings, feelings that appease us, feelings that broaden us, right? So we can't receive these, right, if our heart is too cluttered or is too small, right, too tight. So Rumi is going to talk about the purification of the heart. And once you have achieved this purification, it's going to be easier to have these kind of experiences, to receive these kinds of feelings, right, from the divine. Okay, so the way to understand this, we have to go back actually to Plato, because this whole poem is really inspired by Plato. So I'm going to say a few words on Plato, and I'm going to talk especially about the allegory of the cave. And because this is the backdrop. So how many of you have heard of the allegory of the cave? Just put your hands. Okay, so a lot of you, very good. Okay, so I'll retell it just in case, briefly, for those who have forgotten. Plato talks about, this is a teaching from Plato where he wants us to understand the nature of reality, right? And for Plato, remember, reality, there are two levels of reality. Right? So in this story, he describes this. He tells a story of a bunch of people who were prisoners in a cave for the whole life. Their whole life, they were prisoners in this cave. And they were chained in the cave in a way that they could only look at the back of the cave. In other words, they were chained so that they couldn't turn their heads, they couldn't turn their bodies. They were like this, right? So that they could only see the back of the cave. Now, outside of the cave, there's ordinary life. There's sunlight, there's everything going on, but they don't see that. All they see are the shadows that are cast on the wall, on the back wall of the cave from what's going on outside, right? They just see in the shadow reality of what's going on outside. And that's their life, that they've lived the whole life like this. So this is their reality, these shadows. Now, one day, one of them gets free, able to, right, maybe lost a lot of weight and shoop, came out of the chain, right? And that person, of course, is very curious, wants to see what's behind it. So he begins to turn. But of course, if you've never seen the light, it's painful, right? But nevertheless, he squints and he's trying and he's turning and he's groping, he's kind of crawling out of the cave, and it's so painful in his eyes, but he persists. He comes at the entrance of the cave, slowly over time opens his eyes, and he sees all of a sudden, oh my God, this is reality. Obviously, we have only been seeing a world, the shadows, right? This is true reality. And so he rushes back into the cave and he tries to free all the other prisoners and bring them outside. But, they have become complacent. They have become comfortable in the cave. So they're like, be quiet. We're trying to watch the shadows here. Shut up. If you can't be shut up, if you can't shut up, we're going to shut you up. And I forget the end of the story, if they kill him or if they chain him back or if he escapes, I forgot. But in any case, a tragic story because everyone chooses to stay in the cave, right? So, anybody know the meaning of that story for Plato, according to Plato? Let's see if we can, and then we'll transition to Rumi. What's the meaning of this story by Plato?
Basically, a lot of people, I guess, are trapped in their mind, and there's more to life than what they believe.
Okay, yes, that's the idea. And then Kestenbaum, yes, people prefer comfort over truth, right? Exactly, right? Plato's actually talking about two dimensions, the dimension of the material and the dimension of the, we'll say spiritual, okay? For Plato, there are two realms, two worlds. The world of matter, which is the world that we see, feel, touch, the world which we navigate all day long, right? But then there's a deeper reality, which Plato calls the ideal reality. Right, let me take away, I said material spiritual, I'm going to say instead material ideal, right? This is closer to Plato, right? There's an ideal reality. In other words, this is a reality of how things should be and not how things are, right? Material life is how things are. You look around, this is how things are. Ideal reality is the sense that you have that there is something better, right? These are all the ideals, the ideal of justice, the ideal of freedom, the ideal of true love, the ideal of beauty, right? None of these things you can find in the material realm. So how do we know, where are they? They are in that other reality. We have connection to that other reality, right? For example, you can ask yourself, how do I know? Yes, the forms blades, yes. I'm trying to explain it without technical terms. Yes. For example, a lot of us are outraged when we see injustice, right? Now, how do we know what is justice? Do we have examples in the world of justice? No, right? There is no place in the world where you have a purely just society. So how do we know what is justice, right? Because, says Plato, we are connected to this dimension of how things should be. We don't only know what things are, we also know how things should be because we have a dual citizenship. We are caught between these two realities. We are in the what is, but we also have a connection to the realm of what things should be. And that's how we can come into the what is and say, this ain't right. It should be like this, right? How do we know about justice, about freedom, about true love? Because we have this connection to this other realm, right? Everybody understands Plato? Wave at me if you got what I'm saying. Okay, any questions on Plato so far? Okay, so two worlds, right? And of course, the transition from one to the other is painful for Plato, right? And you have to go through this kind of, pain in the eyes and nevertheless persist to move from one dimension to the next, right? Now for Rumi, we're going to have something similar. But for Rumi, the realms are slightly different. We have, again, the material realm, but this time we have what I said before, the spiritual realm, right? So we have two realms, not the ideal this time, but the spiritual, the realm of God and so forth. And for Rumi, just like for Plato, the transition from one to the other, and now this is a key point, make sure you write it down, the transition from the material to the spiritual is impossible without going through suffering or pain, right? In other words, you will never even bother with the spiritual realm unless you have tasted pain. Why? Because the material realm is very comfortable. As long as everything's going well in the material realm, why should you look for another realm? Right? It's like us now, we're looking to live on Mars. Why? Because we have destroyed the planet. Right? If we were fine on the planet, we wouldn't have to look, for other planets, right? So it's the same thing. If you're doing good in the material realm, if everything is fine, you're not going to have an incentive to look for something else, right? So what Rumi is saying is that therefore the experience of suffering needs to be inflicted upon us to awaken us to something more. Otherwise, we won't even bother. And this experience of suffering for Rumi is something that is given to us. By who? What do you find in the text? Who gives us suffering? Based on the text, the ladder to heaven.
Divine.
Exactly, right? So suffering here is seen, yes, right. Suffering is seen here as a gift, as a remedy, as medicine to jolt us out of our material complacency, to jolt us out of being trapped in one realm and help us begin to rise, right, the ladder to heaven, to climb the ladder to a different, deeper dimension, right, which just like for Plato, is the most essential dimension. If you miss it, you miss what it's really like to be human, right? I mean, to live only in the material realm, you're nothing more than a dog, which is the worst insult in Islam, right? Not like in the United States where dogs rule the earth, right? You can see in Manhattan how dogs have begun to rule their masters, right? In the Muslim tradition, a dog is a low being, right? So it's an insult actually to call someone a dog. So if you're only in the material realm, how are you different from the animals around you, right? You're just like them, right? The thing that contributes to the dignity of being human is the ability to rise above this realm and to know this other dimension, right? According to Rumi. So suffering, therefore, is a gift that in a way gives us the incentive, that moves us, that pushes us, that challenges us out of our comfort zone to explore. Similar to Job again, right? He's really the founding text, right? You find him everywhere. He was complacent in the material realm with his possessions, his children. He was fine until God destroyed his life, right? And then he started to see more, right? To experience more. So this is the idea. So let's read together a little bit. Just what I said, the quote here on page 13. Go to the second line, the first line. The worldly sense is the ladder to this world. The religious sense is the ladder to heaven. And then he says this: seek the well-being of that sense from the physician. Beg the well-being of this sense from the man beloved of God, right? So the physician here is God. And the remedy is necessarily bitter. Right? Let me ask you this, just as illustration. How many of you have mothers or grandmothers who are into natural treatments of the cold, the common cold? Anybody have that? I do. Okay. Now, these remedies, tell me a little bit. Let's have a list. What do they give you to eat or drink when you have a cold or the flu that's like supposed to be natural? Let's hear some of your examples.
Ginger.
Okay, ginger. Does it taste good, ginger?
No.
Garlic, eating cloves of garlic when you have like a sore throat or a
Yes.
flu.
Does it taste good, the garlic?
I mean, I like garlic, so I don't mind, but I know it's not good for everybody when they eat it raw.
Okay, very good.
My father gave me this serum here for the coronavirus, as far as making sure my immune system is kept strong. It's like a mix of garlic, cayenne pepper, and ginger, and things within that class of medicine to kind of keep my. So I'm supposed to take like a teaspoonful of this like every day.
Very good. Very good. Actually, my remedy. Oh my God, am I echoing? Why am I echoing? Am I good? Yes, okay, good. Right, my remedy for the cold is to take some jalapeno peppers and I fry them, and then I eat them with bread, like directly. And they taste kind of good because I like peppers, but they completely tear like everything, right? But it works, right? So if you notice in all of these remedies, the way to fight illness is through a pain. Remedies are always painful, right? It's not like, nowadays we just prescribe NyQuil and it's not painful at all, but it doesn't really, NyQuil, by the way, doesn't heal you, right? NyQuil just knocks you out. So it doesn't work. So we can see how medicine is necessarily bitter. The only way to heal, you have to go through bitterness to heal. And this is what Rumi is saying. The only way to truly heal the human heart, the only way to purify the human heart, which is naturally corrupt and full of toxins and negative emotions, right? Or very small or narrow. Now notice the parallels with Maimonides, right? The heart is either too small or it's cluttered. Same thing. The only way to purify this, right, is through the cleansing experience of suffering. If you never suffer, your heart stays small or it stays cluttered. Now, of course, this entails that you accept the suffering, right? Because there are two ways, actually. Make sure you write this down. There are two ways to react to suffering. Somebody does something that causes you pain. There are two ways to react. Number one, you become a hater. So you look at that person and you're like, you know what, I hate you now. And I hate all of your kind, right? Whether it's a race or a gender, right? And now your heart, which was small, is even smaller, right? Your heart, which was already cluttered, now is even more cluttered, right? So this is one common way to react to suffering, is to become worse. But there's another path, right? And this is the path of receiving the suffering and accepting the suffering and allowing the experience to go through us without looking on the outside, allowing the experience to cleanse us. In other words, you go through a season of pain. Say someone broke up with you unfairly, right? Now you hate them, right? Instead of that, right, choosing to look towards yourself rather than towards the other, right? Asking yourself, okay, what could I have done better? How can I do better next time? How could I have been more loving? How you don't even think about the other anymore. You are allowing the experience to cleanse you. You are allowing the experience to move through you. This is what will genuinely cause, right, a healing moment for the heart. And you will emerge from that experience with less clutter, with a broader heart, and with more cleansed, right, inner being, right? Am I making sense so far? Everybody follows me? You see what I'm saying? Okay. Good. So let's look at some of the text. Now, according to Rumi, there are four main ways that, four main sufferings that we will go through. All of us at one point will go through one of these, right? There are four main experiences we'll go through, which can be very cleansing if we allow them to be so, right? So let's look at that. I'm on page 13, last line. The spiritual way ruins the body, and having ruined it, restores it to prosperity. This is the main idea, and then we'll have the four. This spiritual way, the spiritual path, can only be visible when the material realm is disturbed. When your comfort, your material comfort is disturbed. You cannot glimpse the spiritual path unless the material realm has become disturbed. It's very rare when some of us have a natural, some of us do have a natural vision, right? And a gift in seeing the spiritual realm without needing to suffer. But most of us, we cannot really, we have no interest even in that realm unless the material has been disturbed. Okay, so let's look at the first one. We'll interpret it together. Let's see how much time we have. Good. So, ruin the house for the sake of the golden treasure, and with that same treasure builds it better than before. Okay, what do you think the house means? What does it mean? What is Rumi referring to here as the house that is ruined? So I put you on gallery view. Okay, good question. We are on page 14 with the first moment of suffering. Okay, so let me hear some of you. What does it mean? It's page 13 in some of your books. The ruin the house normally should be page 14. Okay, so what is
it? To like ruin like the sense of comfort, to kind of like break out of that comfort? Because I know we spoke about that a little bit with like Maimonides, like getting out of your habits.
Okay, so yeah, the house can mean simply what you've built in your life, or it can mean your protection that you've built, right, around yourself. So a lot of us, our house can represent our families, it can represent our work, our jobs, any stability we've built, right? This is the house. One day you lose your job, right? One day you lose the most important member of your family, the person who held everyone together, right? One day you lose all your money. Or one day, literally, your house is destroyed by a hurricane, right? At that moment, says Rumi, stop. Before you fall into despair, remember, for the sake of the golden treasure. In other words, in every tragedy, says Rumi, there is a treasure. I want you to remember this, even outside of any discussion of the philosophy of religion, right? Even outside of Rumi. Every moment of darkness contains a treasure, if we know to look for it. And most of us, we get so overwhelmed by the darkness that we miss the treasure. Or we want to run away so fast from the darkness, we just want to not experience it, we miss the treasure. Every moment of pain contains a treasure. Treasures of wisdom, treasures of compassion, treasures of expansion. We saw this with Job, right? Remember the treasure that he discovered at the end of his experience, how the pain broadened him, how the pain helped him grow, made him more compassionate. And so this is the idea. The house is ruined. My life is ruined, right? This is the experience when you feel your life is ruined by something. At that moment, says Rumi, there, in that ruin, there is a treasure if we know to look for it, right? And this is what I've done in my life often. Right? When I go through a difficult time, my first reaction, of course, is to resolve the difficult time and get out of it. So I start overthinking, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? How do I solve this? Of course, it doesn't work. After a few days of, busting my mind over this, I realize, okay, it's here. I am here. And at that moment, I ask a very simple question. What am I here to learn? And then my deliverance begins, right? As I start to explore as I first of all accept that I am in this painful situation, when I accept the pain, when I accept that I'm stuck now, the only way forward is not trying to repress it or escape it or solve it, right? Is to sit down and finally have the humility to ask, what am I supposed to learn in this situation? How can I grow? How can I mature? What should I learn? And at that moment, I begin slowly the journey out, right? This is, I find it. Eventually, I find it, right? Yes, to heal. You become, instead of trying to escape it, you become introspective, reflective on how can this make me better? Even if it's not your fault and someone inflicted this on you. Right? The first reaction is, you want to kill that person, or you want to, blame everybody. This is still not accepting, right? The suffering. You're refusing the medicine. You're throwing it in the face of everybody else. The moment you sit and you're like, okay, fine. Deep breath. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to accept this pain. I'm going to allow this pain in, and I'm going to learn from it. And at that moment, you are beginning to unpack the golden treasure, right? So this is the first thing, right? Now, let's look at the second one. Cut off the water.
Professor, can I say something?
Oh, yeah.
It's Rodriguez. No, I just can say, I absolutely agree with you. I'm a little older, so I've gone through things, but I think that what the values that society teaches us, maybe more the Western world teaches us, is that you have to be a doer. You need to solve. You need to figure it out. You cannot just sit there and let go. Rather, you need to tackle the problem, right? This is the language we have. Let's go full on. Let's try to, how can we solve this problem now?
Exactly, right? Absolutely. Everything is a problem that we need to solve. And we don't understand, and we'll see this with Marcel, that some things are mysteries that need to be experienced. In other words, there are some things you just have to go through in a state of complete confusion and pain. You have to go through this because although you don't know what's happening, things are going on inside of you. There is an alchemical transformation at work going on. So even though your mind is paralyzed and you feel like you're losing your mind in this situation, you are being transformed from the inside. And so if you allow it, right? So absolutely, this is very countercultural, right? What Rumi is teaching us, to sit in the pain and to accept the pain, and to make the decision to grow from the pain, right? Instead of solving it, escaping it, making it go away, right, somehow. And in fact, in our civilization, if you have pain, what do? You go to a pharmacy and you get a painkiller. That's how we function, right? We never allow the transformation that the pain can bring, because we don't want to feel pain. And so therefore, because we're constantly numbing ourselves to the pain, we are losing the opportunity for transformation that only pain can bring, right? Yes, absolutely, Trujillo, right? We run from it, or we try to numb it with, whatever we can get our hands on, right? And we're missing, right? I know a lot of people, right? You go through pain, you start drinking. You go through pain, you start to take whatever, whatever you can get to numb it. You can't. Why don't we have the courage? Pain doesn't kill, by the way. It won't kill you, right? But we need to learn, we need to develop the courage to experience pain, because this is the price of our transformation. We cannot be transformed if we don't know how to experience pain, right? Okay. Very good, Rodriguez. So second point, cut off the water, cleanse the river bed, then cause drinking water to flow in it. Okay, so what could the water signify? It's a little different from the house, right? What would the water be in our lives? What could that mean? So yes, the water is being purified, but what does the water mean, Trujillo? So nobody knows? When's the last experience you felt that you were receiving a steady stream of water, and all of a sudden, cut, no more water? Yes, and I would add to what Christensen is saying. He's talking about coronavirus. This is the water could be the love we receive from our relationships, right? A lot of us, we receive steady stream of water from either our parents, our siblings, our beloveds, right? We receive the water, and one day cut. I think the best example is a relationship, a romantic relationship, right? Water's flowing, we're being nourished, and one day the betrayal, the breakup, cut, right? Yes, absolutely. No more physical contact. Something is broken, right? So looking at the example of the romantic relationship, right? You were receiving steady flow of water. You were nourished by this person, and now one day they leave, right? Now you have no water. What's the first thing you do? Typically, what's the reflex? What's the best way to get over heartbreak? Quick, in like 5 hours. Yes, find more water. Very good. Right? This is the quick fix, right? Quick fix for any breakup, guys. Find another person, quick, right? A lot of us do this. We get the rebound quick. And then, but what is the text saying we should do instead? Before the rebound. Or instead of the rebound. What does the text tell us? Exactly, right, Trujillo? Give ourselves time to cleanse. Otherwise, we will be back in the same polluted waters. And we will again have to cut off, right? This is a profound advice when you go through a breakup, right? First thing you do before you look for someone is go cleanse the riverbed. Cleanse of many things, actually. Cleanse of your resentment. Cleanse of your hatred. This is, by the way, the powerful work of forgiveness, which I wish we had time to talk about. This is the act of cleansing the act of thinking, how can I do better next time? What did I do wrong? What is wrong with me that this happened? Not thinking about the other. You don't need to, right? To cleanse the riverbed, what they did wrong, right? It's not going to help you. Again, turning inward, taking the time to heal, I think. Taking the time to understand, taking the time to detox from the negative emotions that this breakup has created is fundamental before, right? And that is the treasure, right? going through this purification process and forgiveness process is going to enhance the way you love next time rather than reduce it. If you don't cleanse the riverbed, you will go back in a relationship, but with a smaller heart. And each time you do this without cleansing the riverbed, the heart is smaller, smaller, and smaller, and harder, and of course it's going to be catastrophic at the end, right? If you take the time to cleanse the riverbed, if you take the time to forgive, right, you actually go back with a broader heart, and now you can love deeper, more sincerely, right? Actually, I'm dying to do a quick parenthesis on forgiveness, because this is such a fundamental skill. I have 10 minutes and I think I will take the liberty to do it, because this is one of the most misunderstood concepts, most misused concepts. In fact, it's not used at all anymore because it's so misunderstood. And it is if you have one thing that you will take from this class, is that skill. So let me do that. If you don't mind any objections to me doing a quick workshop on forgiveness, a 10-minute workshop. And we'll just finish with that particular quote, and then you can imagine the rest. Are we good? Hands? Okay. All right. Let me do a quick workshop, because this is really, really very important skill, especially when you're dealing with pain, right? Because a lot of the time the pain is inflicted by someone. And that someone is not going to be your best friend once they're done with this pain, right? So, and often the pain destroys us. Right? This is one of the main problems with pain, is that it destroys us. This is why we want to avoid it. It makes us more closed off. It makes us more angry. It makes us more hateful. We become resentful, and we have a hard time loving again once you've been betrayed, right? So how do we do this, right? How do we, in other words, what I'm going to teach you today is how to experience the pain without being damaged by it. Let me say that again. Right? There's a path to experiencing pain with not only you're not damaged by it, but you're purified by it, right? How? Right? This is the question, because what Rumi is saying is exactly to be able to do that, but how, right? Okay. So the concept of forgiveness is more ancient than Rumi, obviously. It's originally a Hebrew concept, which comes from which in Hebrew, the actual word that translates into forgiveness is the word nasa, which actually literally means to carry. Okay, so this is strange, right? So to forgive in the Hebrew context, which is where this word originated, is to carry. Okay, what does it mean when someone hurts you to carry? That doesn't seem very liberating. Anybody know? What does it mean to carry? To make the choice, I'm going to carry this rather than something else. Anybody know?
I would say like to take responsibility or ownership of the suffering or pain.
Okay, very good. Now, what are you not doing when you choose to carry? That you could be doing, that most of us do. Something hits you, what's the reaction?
Blame.
You throw it back, right? This is the most natural reaction to pain. Someone yells at you, you're gonna yell back louder, right? Someone hits you, you punch them back. Someone does you wrong, you do them wrong. Someone cheats on you, watch me, right? So our natural reaction is not to carry. Our natural reaction is to throw the thing back in their face, right? Now, when we throw the thing back in the face of the other, what are we doing to ourselves, to them, and to the world? What are we doing? When you start to, so imagine your romantic partner cheats on you, and you're like, oh yeah? Watch me. I'm gonna film it too. And you film yourself. Well, it's terrible ideas I'm giving you, right? But you cheat on them. Now what have you become? Yes, Rolevas. You have assimilated the toxins, and you have become as bad as them. That's the damage, right? In other words, to carry, however, is in a way you take the suffering, but you refuse that the suffering turns into toxic behavior or thoughts. Okay, let me say that again. To carry or to forgive, same idea, is to take the suffering without reflecting it back. Let me say that again. To carry or to forgive is to take up the suffering while choosing not to reflect it back, either in actions or in words. Now, when you're doing this, you are in fact protecting yourself from any potential damage the suffering could inflict on you. It's not the suffering that damages you, it's what it does to you, right? Let me say that again. This is so important. The suffering itself never damages us. We heal from the suffering in a few months and we're good. It's not that which damages us. It's what we choose to do with that suffering. Do we choose to become resentful? Do we choose to become ourselves what we have experienced? Do we choose to become hateful? Do we choose to cheat now on them because they cheated on us? And that, the choices we make, the allowing of the suffering to transform into toxic reaction, that is what damages us, right? It is the toxicity that we allow to grow inside of us as a result of the suffering, which is the real damage, not the suffering, right? So in other words, when you choose to carry, meaning you refuse to allow what happened to make you toxic, you are in fact not only saving yourself, but you're saving the other and you're saving the earth. Let's go over that, right? So I'm hearing a few of your comments, right? Yes, evil is a relay torch. Excellent, Bella. It's a relay sport, sorry, when the one who's burned turns to pass the torch, right? Absolutely, exactly. And you just, so that's, so when you don't choose to, so let's look a little bit at each level, right? When you choose to carry without pushing back, how do you save yourself? Let's start with yourself, then the other, and then the world, okay? So how is it good for the self to not throw the suffering back into the face of the other?
Well, when you're walking around with resentment, it's a poison, right? You're poisoning. There's a saying that it's when you're wishing anger at someone, it's you're drinking the poison. You're wishing something on someone else, but actually you're drinking the poison.
Exactly, right? Are you going to allow the pain to transform into poison? It doesn't have to, by the way, right? It doesn't have to. I've experienced this where the pain can simply be the pain. And when you allow it to just be the pain, it actually feels purifying, right? You feel clear in your mind and in your heart. You feel clear. You're suffering like hell, but you're clear. But a lot of us we allow the pain to transform into poison, and it is the poison that damages us much more than the pain. So when you forgive, first person you save, first person you free is yourself. You choose not to become like them. That's forgiveness. It's choosing not to become like that person, what they did, right? Yes, I'm going to come to you, Nasir, in a second, about how it's good for the other person, right? But everybody, do you all understand how first and foremost forgiveness is for us? Everybody sees that? 'Cause that's so important, because a lot of us are like, I'm not going to forgive them. They don't deserve it. Or they didn't ask for forgiveness. Why should I forgive them? But forgiveness is really about you. It's an internal thing. You don't need the other person to repent. You don't need them to beg for forgiveness. It's something you're doing to yourself. I refuse to become like you. I'm not going to throw back what you throw at me, because I'm right, when, like Michelle Obama said, they go low, we go high. Right? I'm not going to go low like you. Right? I'm not going to allow what you did to me to change me into a worse person. I'm not going to allow it to make me toxic and resentful and violent and so forth. So first thing, that first person that is freed is yourself. Right? Now, how does it free the other? I see a comment by Nasir. Forgiveness is showing mercy to the other person. It gives peace to the one who is in pain. So yes, first of all, we do get peace because in a way we are freed of the toxins, but we are also helping the other. Because in a way, when you forgive, what you're saying is that, okay, you did this, but now I'm giving you a fresh start, right? You did this, it hurt, and I'm not allowing it to make me toxic. And I am in a way absorbing what you did. I'm not throwing it back at you. In a way, you're giving the relationship the possibility of a new beginning. right? When you forgive. When you don't forgive, you can't. You're always going to be bringing this thing back up. You're always going to keep the relationship old and always going to bring up the past. Like, you know, those couples who fight like over like, I don't know, a penny, and then they come out with all the other stuff. All the fights are like this, right? This is a way to renew your relationship, to allow, to keep, to carry in a way that is non-toxic for you, but also which allows a new beginning for the relationship. So you are, in a way, there's a beautiful saying by an Indian guru that I heard. You are familiar with the concept of karma, right? Sure, this is a big concept. Who's familiar with karma? I mean, we're in Queens, right? All of you should know karma. Okay, very good. So we know this concept, right? You do something bad, consequence is gonna happen. So this actually helps us. When someone does something bad to us, we're like, yeah, you know what? Karma. They're gonna suffer one day. That's not forgiveness, right? This guru taught, and I forgot his name, maybe it was Yogananda, but he taught that we can actually carry the karma of someone else. In other words, they do something, this stuff is supposed to happen to them now. When you forgive, you cut. You save them from the karmic result or consequence. So you got to try this out metaphysically, but this is kind of an explanation within Hinduism, actually, that when you forgive, you actually take on the karma of the other person. In other words, they are saved at that moment from any consequences that their sin against you might bring upon them, right? So that's one kind of metaphysical explanation. And finally, of course, how do you save the world when you forgive? How does it help the world at large when you choose to carry rather than throw it back into their face? Nobody knows. What happens to the world around you when you choose to add to the already existing evil with your reaction? It's, as Bella mentioned, right?
It's like a domino effect. It just keeps happening.
Exactly. You're adding iniquity into the world, right? Iniquity hits you. Now you're throwing double iniquity back into the world, right? Their iniquity plus your anger. So we simply continue to pollute the world, right? And so in a way, to choose to carry in this way is a way to purify the world, right? So it's a very powerful skill, right? If you can be open, right, to practicing this. And it's difficult. There was one person once hurt me. Took me a year of every day being like, I don't want to be angry, I don't want to be resentful, please, I want to love, I want to feel. I would just say that over each time I would have the hateful thought. I would just be like, no. I don't want to feel resentful, I want to feel loving. And I had to say this for a year, and then finally one day I was good. It was gone, right? So this is a practice which you actually, it's like a muscle. You have to continuously, at first, you will be obsessed with hatred, right? And with negativity. And you have to, in a way, constantly re-educate your mind, right? I would tell myself, no, I don't want to be, I choose love, I choose love, I choose love. And you're like, it's a choice that you're constantly making consciously every moment in your mind. And one day you overcome, right? One day. So this is such a powerful skill. And I think this is what Rumi is talking about, right? Cut off the water, this thing happened, cleanse, right? Cleanse the riverbed, learn to cleanse yourself, because as you learn to do this, as you learn to forgive, you're giving yourself a fresh start for a new relationship, or even with the same person, right? But you're giving yourself a fresh start that you cannot have otherwise. If you don't do this, you will come in the next relationship with this huge baggage behind you, 10 suitcases of hatred. And it will affect your relationship. Don't think it's going to stay out there in the basement. No, it's going to resurface continuously, right? Until you get rid of this baggage through the act of forgiveness, whether it's baggage you've accumulated from childhood to your last relationship, you cannot even hope to have a relationship that will be beautiful, because this will constantly ruin it. So this is such a powerful tool, I think, to really give yourself a fresh start. where you can go in the next relationship with a pure heart and be, right, I'm capable now of loving you without all this stuff coming in all the time. Okay, any questions? This is a hard topic. I want to hear your questions. Go a little bit over time, like maybe 5 minutes. Actually, I have till 6:15, so I'm good. Any questions? This is important. A lot of us are resisting, right? This is a hard thing to do, to carry. Is it realistic? I should be hearing a number of objections right now. So I'm listening. No, everybody's good. You're going to go and forgive like tonight.
I was going to say, for me personally, this is something that I've had to practice, and I'm going to be honest, it's one of the most difficult things. And this is actually quite new to me. I've just started doing this a couple of years ago. That I've had the similar experience that I've even within my prayer saying this effing, I hope the best. Then I would say, I wish the best for them. I hope they have a good life. You know, even though, and then every day will progressively get better, right? Like I would start removing expletives. And then I would notice I'm the one at peace, right? Despite what I may feel that I was hurt or betrayed. But I can't say that was always what I did, you know. Sometimes I did retaliate or more so I always say I'm passive aggressive, like I would just cut people off. I was more the passive aggressive person, which is also, there is spite and pain in that. There is no kindness.
Absolutely. Right. And this, by the way, with forgiveness, you have to fake it till you make it. This is what Rodriguez is saying. Me too. Like for a year, I was really hateful. I was just like, you know, and you just have to choose. Forgiveness is a choice. You won't feel it at first. You have to practice this tool of choosing love over hatred and choosing kindness over resentment and just wanting that, right? And little by little, you become. Right? This is what happens. By the time you're done with the forgiving process, maybe it takes less long than for you, right? Your heart will be different. You will be loving at a deeper level. You will be capable of loving a new human being in a level that you weren't before, right? So the pain and the forgiveness actually enlarges your heart, right? Not only purifies your heart, but enlarges it for the next relationship, right? Any other questions?
The hardest is accept our mistakes.
Sorry, go ahead again, Trujillo.
Yes. I also wanted to add that one of the obstacles to get better at forgiving is recognize our mistakes, our errors. So I think we have to start it from that. So once we are kind of naked in a virtual way, and we recognize what we did wrong and what could be better, I think it's a good start.
Yeah, excellent, right? This is the two texts, right? The house and the riverbed, right? The house is looking for the treasure. So when you're going through, like, again, someone betrays you, you're now super angry and resentful. Okay, what's the treasure? What can I learn, right? And then the second thing with the river and the cleansing the riverbed, okay, now how can I forgive them, right? So it's both. You find the treasure and you cleanse the riverbed. These are the two things, the two tools, right, that you can use when somebody has hurt you. Where's the treasure? What can I learn? And now how can I now begin the cleansing, right? Very good. Simone, I thought you had a question. I thought you raised your hand. Was I right?
Yeah. So you know when you're like in a situation and you get in an argument and you know that the other person is at fault, but whatever, their ego comes into play and they don't apologize, and you find yourself like being that bigger person, like, okay, I know I wasn't wrong, but let me just be the bigger person. Do you feel like that's always the case? Like, do we have to be that bigger person to forgive all the time, or you wait for that other person to like wake up?
Yeah, exactly, right? Because to be the bigger person is for you, right? At that moment, you're right. Sometimes it doesn't help the other person if you forgive, because they're not ready to change, right? But ultimately, the first person you help when you forgive is you. So it's always to your best interest to be the bigger person. Now, the other person might be intrigued, right? And that might help them, right, to grow. Now there's more, but some people simply don't, right? They don't see until you really tell them, right? That's a whole other story, right? But the forgiveness is an internal work. You don't even need to have that conversation, right? But it's an internal work, which is first and foremost for you, right? And the other person will more likely be open to change if you're capable of first going through that and then maybe communicating with them, right? So if you really want to help the other person who seems clueless and keeps on redoing the thing over and over again, yes, at one point you should communicate, but you can't communicate effectively if you haven't first done this. If you come to the person all angry, it's gonna make things worse. So if you do need to communicate, and often we do, you need to tell the person, this is hurting me, can you please, not do that? We first have to anyways go through that process so we can come in a loving ways that they will listen to, right? Does that make sense, Simone? Simone, are you still with us? Simone, yes? Does that respond to your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Good. Any other observation or question or yes, Segal, go ahead.
I had a question about forgiveness. So would you say that forgiveness and moving on would be the same thing, or are those two completely, like, if you look back in the past but don't feel pain from it, but you don't exactly, like, you wouldn't exactly want to meet that person, would you say that's the same? Or
yeah, forgiveness doesn't mean, of course, that you get back with that person, that you even have a reconciliation with that person in life, right? Because it depends on the person. And sometimes, to be honest, people are like, crazy. But in your heart, you're at peace, right? Your heart hasn't been altered. You've allowed your heart to remain pure, right? So forgiveness can be both. It can help you move on because now you don't have the baggage, right? Or better, it could help towards a potential reconciliation, right? So either way, it's great. It can help you either move on towards a new relationship, or it can help you move on towards a better version of the relationship with that person, right? But in any case, it's freeing, right? Does that help, Segal?
yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? We have like 30 seconds left. Okay, good. So if any of you still have questions, of course you can stay after. Also about your test, if you want to talk about your test. Otherwise, we are good. Tomorrow we will just do introduction to Nietzsche and also the MLK discussions. So we'll see you all tomorrow.